Thank you all for being with us today for the third global meeting of the Plural Europe for Women project organized by the University of Corsica. Today we are going to focus on the issue of stereotypes, notably with Jenna El Hilali, who will talk to us about myths and stereotypes. Marie Péré, a student in the Masters in Education and Training at the National Higher Institute of Teaching and Education at the University of Corsica, and Camille Courrieu, also a student in the same field as Marie Péré. We'll conclude with Leah Salvini, Director of the Info Center for Family and Women's Rights in Southern Corsica. Before that, a brief update on the Plural Europe for Women project under the CRV program. It aligns with EU treaties and UNESCO Goal 5 for gender equality. These are global and European programs we're part of. Before that, just a quick update on the Plural Europe for Women project, which is part of the CRV program on citizenship, equality, rights, and values of the European Commission. It also fits within the legal framework of both the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union and the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union, as well as the Sustainable Development Goal number 5 from UNESCO, which aims to promote gender equality worldwide. So, these are international programs, both on a global scale and within Europe that we are part of. So, it's not exactly a research project, it's more of a project aimed at raising awareness and promoting certain values that are shared, including by the university, of course. So, before that, we're going to take a little step back and look at the last 3 local meetings organized by the project. We'll show you a video that will recap the 3 themes that were discussed. The theme of ecofeminism, the theme of school guidance, and the theme of the fight against long-term unemployment.
The project EPF continues its journey exploring different themes and new ways to get people engaged across Europe. In September 2024, Université Pasquale Paoli, partner of the EPF project in Corsica, hosted the first EPF Informal Day, which took place in the beautiful surroundings of Corte. Students actively participated to groups discussions, sharing concerns and issues that might be hindering the achievement of gender equality, and also suggesting what possible solutions could be implemented. Highlight of the day was the art workshop held by illustrator Julie Bois, where students paid a great tribute to committed Mediterranean women by drawing the portraits. Some of the works will be added to our Call for Creators launched in June. The Call for Creators is a call to action for creators to share their thoughts, experiences and artworks with the rest of the EPF community. Contents are published regularly on our EPF website and disseminated through our social channels. In October 2024, SSF Solidaridad Sin Fronteras, one of the Spanish partners of the project, organized the second global community meeting, inviting very interesting speakers such as Sol Ailen Odone, project manager at Guarani Association, Martina Lager, project manager at Asud, and Marta Nuero Aristizabal, coordinator of Iroko Desarrollo Forestal Sostenible. The theme of the call was Navigating Change, Education, Employment and Climate Challenges, introducing the topics to be discussed in the next local community meetings organized in Spain, Italy, France and Germany.
In this activity, I've gained a lot of knowledge about climate change, what's happening on the planet, and it's something that can harm all of us.
I found the event really interesting, and it made me appreciate a lot of things that are done here that I didn't know about, and they really caught my attention.
December 2024, all the EPF partners were busy organizing the local meetings, which saw a large participation of young people and students actively involved in the conversation, sharing points of views and new ideas. Great focus this time was placed on women access to STEM disciplines and on the challenges caused by climate
We
change.
absolutely need to have an intersectional approach to this issue. The intersectional approach makes us feel connected to the women in that poor hemisphere of our planet where our consumption habits have a heavy impact.
So, we're going to continue with a young doctor in comparative literature who holds degrees from both the University of Corsica and the University of Pisa in Italy, Jenna El Hilali, a specialist in comparative literature and myths. So, Jenna, could you, explain to our listeners in a few words how myths, which might seem distant to us, maybe a bit outdated, are actually the root cause of how we perceive the world, how we categorize objects, people, and feelings, and in what way they ultimately shape our representations of the world today.
So hello, everyone. Yes, I think viewing stereotypes is intriguing. Examining stereotypes reveals their ideas and the plurality that allows diverse interpretations. Highlighting their ambiguity reminds us no interpretation is final, as poetic language is obscure. So, questioning stereotypes through these myths ultimately allows us to show how they have conveyed a certain number of ideas and how the plurality which characterizes them allows for various ways of understanding them. So, by highlighting the equivocal nature of these myths, this allows us to recall that no reading is definitive, since poetic speech is marked by its obscurities, and therefore that we should in a certain way relearn how to read the ancient poets. So, these myths, what's interesting is that they've been able to convey a number of ideas, and the fact that we're rehabilitating them today, which we'll discuss through some examples, allows us to rediscover the original function of these myths, namely their ambiguity.
Maybe we can take an example, starting with Medea, who is both a passionate woman, betrayed, and at the same time a child murderer. What does the story of Medea tell us about the representations of women throughout history and even today?
So, from the myth of Medea, what we're going to take away is the infanticide. She commits the most abominable act. What do we remember about Medea today? What we remember about her is the figure consumed by vengeance. We only remember the woman afflicted with murderous madness and thus hysterical. And I'm going to come back to this theme of hysteria because hysteria has long been seen as a female illness, starting with its name, its etymology, which directly refers to women, and this view goes back to ancient times. In contemporary literature, there's a novel that rehabilitates the figure of Medea, published in 1996 by Christa Wolf, titled Medea's Voice. It's a polyphonic novel in which the author seeks to understand how this negative image of Medea developed, and for that she chooses to return to its source, namely the myth. So, this novel by Christa Wolf can be described as a feminist novel, as it illustrates the conflict between the figure of Medea and an ultra-patriarchal society. For Christa Wolf, it's about looking at this society and observing how the figure of Medea, who is a strong, self-assured and enlightened woman, disturbs this society, which ultimately leads to her being demonized and pushed aside.
So it seems like feminism is working to invert the stigma, meaning that what was once disparaged is becoming a value at least. Another important figure could be Medusa, who has resurfaced with the Me Too movement. A young girl raped by Poseidon. She suffers a double punishment by first being transformed into a gorgon by Athena, gaining the power to turn people to stone with just a glance, and then she is beheaded by Perseus. So what does this story tell us, Jenna, and how is it being reinterpreted today?
Thank you. So I will try to share, and I hope he talks about it very well in his Metamorphoses. He tells this story in great detail and elaborates on how the decapitated head of Medusa will ultimately be placed on Athena's shield to scare off enemies. And so certainly in a way through this decapitation, she is punished a second time for a crime of which she is the victim. Finally, we're going to, great.
What's Going by Caravaggio.
There you go, exactly. You can see her very well on, well then, there you go. The work of Caravaggio. And so, in the end, all we remember about her is her monstrous nature and the way for Perseus to access. And she tried to rehabilitate her. For Hélène Cixous, she explains this myth as the idea that a man couldn't look at her without being struck and petrified. She reminds us that she is a woman and not a monster, and that she is pregnant when Perseus kills her. And so she explains this myth as the need to cut off, behead the threatening woman. And for Hélène Cixous, Medusa is an exemplary, remarkable image, because she represents the reaction of a phobia that arises when faced with a strong woman who sees you for who you really are. So today, Medusa has become a kind of figure of female empowerment, an icon of the Me Too movement, and that's thanks to the ambiguity that characterizes the mythological narrative. Today, she is also being rehabilitated by people like Noémie Fachon, who is an illustrator and deconstructs gender stereotypes through her Instagram account called Medusa Gorgone. So this account is very interesting because you'll find illustrations of Gorgon women from all over the world who are rising up against all kinds of discrimination and violence against women. There are signs saying, Perseus, you're done for, the Gorgons are in the streets. You'll also find messages to fight against everyday sexism, or more broadly, messages against all forms of discrimination. Noémie Fachon also published a book in 2023 titled The Eye of the Gorgon, in which she offers a feminist reinterpretation that rehabilitates 22 myths. So this way, I think of rehabilitating the figures of Medea or Medusa by artists, writers, associations, or even researchers comes down to considering the myth in its true definition, which is a narrative marked by the need to relearn how to read the ancients and to break free from a fixed and one-dimensional view of the myth. In other words, a stereotype, since by definition, it's a static image. So there you go to help me. So Jenna, thank you.
One last myth. Quickly, that of Scheherazade, a storyteller from 1001 Nights, who everyone knows. Does she represent cunning in the face of dominant power, submission in the face of the world's order by the
at dawn, and so she succeeds in arousing her husband's curiosity to gain an extra day of life until she reaches 1001 nights. And she is the framing narrative for a large number of intertwined stories. At dawn, she manages to spark her husband's curiosity to gain an extra day of life until she reaches 1001 nights. And she is the framing narrative for a large number of intertwined stories. So being cloistered in her home, her sweet, cunning words allow her to survive. So she belongs to a feminine imagination. She is the Eastern woman turned towards pleasures and characterized by her submission. And this perception is largely fueled by the movement known as Orientalism, which consists of a set of images about the East for the West, depicting a whole fantasized Oriental world under the sign of a reclusive feminine offered for observation, that contribute to this abundance of images about women, especially the Eastern woman. So there's a comparatist named Carole Boisdin who reminds us in her study of 1001 Nights that there's a whole imagery of the feminine, like the feminine softness of Scheherazade facing the violence of Sultan Shahriyar. Yet, these representations are facing opposition today, especially through a book published in 2010 by a Lebanese woman named Jumana Haddad, who wrote a book called I Killed Scheherazade. It's an inner story in which the Lebanese Jumana Haddad explains that to be free, she had to kill. Within herself, that figure of Scheherazade, who, according to her, only represented a misleading message. She says, Use persuasion, give men what they need, and they'll spare you. And so for her, this assimilation was absolutely unbearable and hierarchical, which she says she experienced as a woman. While Scheherazade is the only one, as she reminds us, whose story we don't know in the collection. And so she decides to tell the stories of others. So for Jumana Haddad, it's about killing stereotypes related to women, and more specifically to Oriental women. There you go. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jenna, for this overview. And we will also have the opportunity to revisit and delve deeper into it during the local meeting in January, which will be organized around the theme of stereotypes. We're going to continue now with Marie Péré and Camille Courrieu, who are students preparing for the competitive exam to become chief education advisors. So it's a profession that doesn't necessarily exist in other countries, focusing on, or they focus, let's say, on the issue of equality between boys and girls.
Educational advisors who are responsible for the smooth running of school life and who help place students in the best conditions for learning and personal development, both morally and otherwise. Here we go, we're projecting the little slideshow for you. So, against a person caused by one or more of their peers. I don't know if you can see the slideshow.
I can't see it well.
Could you please enlarge it? There we go, now we can see it. So, the definition of harassment is a repetition of violent acts, whether physical or moral, against a person caused by one or more of their peers. So I decided to look into these issues following my first internship that I did in a middle school in Corsica, where I had to deal with different cases of bullying among students. My thesis focuses in particular on the implementation of the FAR program, which is a program designed by the French government to prevent, address, and combat school bullying. In this program, various people are involved, including a resource team made up of different members of the school, such as psychologists, nurses, teachers, and also chief education advisors. Moreover, students also have a major role to play in implementing this program, particularly through the establishment of anti-bullying ambassadors. It's on a voluntary basis. These students act as a link between those who are vulnerable, who are being bullied, and the parents of the students who are also involved in this program and can participate in its implementation in their children's schools. There you go. So I'll hand it over to my colleague Camille, who will introduce herself.
So hello everyone. As Marie mentioned, I'm also in a master's program for educational supervision to become a chief education advisor, and I decided to focus my research on absenteeism. I've put a little definition here that in shorter terms can be summed up as the fact that absenteeism is a series of repeated and unjustified absences by students, which goes against the principle of compulsory education in the educational system. And this absenteeism can have consequences on the students' academic success, but also on their socio-emotional development. There can be various causes for this absenteeism, and it's particularly influenced by social, environmental, and psychological factors. For me, my goal in my research field is to study and explore these relationships, and that's why we find it interesting to look at what can happen within the educational system and the consequences it can have on students' development and on their continued education, which represents a challenge for us as chief education advisors in our schools.
We can't see you, you're not on screen. Yes, you're not showing up anymore, Marie. And you can't hear anything either.
I'm back. So first of all, we thought it was important to come back and really talk about the significance of addressing this topic, about equality among boys and the fight against discrimination against girls, which is really a major issue both in our societies and within our educational systems. There are indeed many educational policies that fight against this discrimination. There is an interministerial agreement that was signed in 2019 and is still in effect today, which really requires schools to promote this message of equality at all educational levels between girls and boys. with the aim of changing the gendered division of roles in our society, starting by addressing the stereotypes that students may already have within the schools. Equality among boys is a fundamental principle that not only encourages a calm and harmonious school environment, but also protects students and places them in conditions free from sexist violence and violent behavior. It promotes diversity and equality in terms of career guidance, which we will discuss a bit later. By addressing this important topic, schools can help build a society that is fairer, more equal and inclusive, and encourages both girls and boys to actively pursue their ambitions and aspirations without being held back by gender stereotypes. Throughout their lives and from their schooling and experiences, they will have to make choices, especially about their educational journey and beyond, in various aspects of life and career paths. We're going to share something with you now. I'm going to try to show you again.
I'm going to share a graph that will illustrate our point. We can see that this discrimination against girls starts very early, especially in schools. It's a phenomenon that has strengthened in France since the high school reform, which now separates the specialties. In general and technological tracks, the observation is as follows. We've noticed that girls are less present in scientific and technological fields than boys, as we can see in this graph. On the other hand, we noticed with Camille during our many internships that in language tracks and those related to health, like ASSP, which stands for Care and Services to People, they are really overrepresented in these fields. So they are really overrepresented in these fields, but significantly underrepresented in scientific and technological tracks.
So, Marie just talked to you about secondary education, specifically high schools, but obviously this gender segregation doesn't stop there. It continues even in higher education. Here, we've shown you another graph from the CIS survey published by the Ministry of Higher Education and Research, which shows that girls are significantly less represented, or rather have fewer options in higher education, particularly in selective programs, and also in scientific fields. As a result, they mostly choose paths that are more aggressive. This survey doesn't have an illustrative graph, but it explains very well how this segregation and underrepresentation continues even in their academic careers. In 2022, among the faculty's teacher researchers, with 40% of women present, only 24% are involved and are teacher researchers in physics.
So we can see that this has an impact, especially in the long term. So, therefore, in fact, these discriminations and stereotypes at school, they contribute to the underrepresentation of women in technological and scientific careers, therefore in their future life. And this ultimately ends up reproducing inequalities in the long term, because education, being discriminatory, reinforces social norms that limit women's opportunities. We need to deconstruct gender stereotypes early, as they still exist despite historical progress. We should build and follow students' personal orientation projects without gender bias. The education system is key in shaping the salary gap between men and women. We need to work as principal education advisors on building and following students' personal orientation projects without them being biased by gender representations or stereotypes. So the education system is the entry point in shaping our society's salary gap between men and women. So, by addressing gender equality, students are working on their future. They are building the society they will soon live in within the educational framework.
So, after having explained to you all the discriminations and the consequences that these can have in the lives of students, we tried to find solutions on our scale, and in particular, within the framework of our Common Culture course relating to the values of the Republic, Along with classmates in the Master's Program for Educational Supervision, we worked on a project to promote gender equality from a young age, addressing stereotypes related to jobs, sports, and women's roles in society. We are competing for a gender equality label for our institution to enhance visibility of our actions. This project is inspired by a middle school in Propriano, southern Corsica, where a lead education advisor organized a photo exhibition of women in traditionally male careers aiming to obtain this label. Through this project, we are competing to obtain an Equality for Girls and Boys label for the establishment in which we will develop this project, which aims to give better internal and external visibility to the actions that we will implement. Inspired by a middle school in Propriano, Corsica, where a gender equality advisor held a photo exhibition of women in male-dominated roles, our project lets students create similar exhibitions. Guided by teachers, they research feminist icons, make portraits, and prepare presentations. On March 8th, they present to the community, which votes on the best work. The winning class names their grade after the woman they presented, like 5th grade Marie Curie. So, our project has been adapted so that the students themselves create this exhibition and are guided throughout the year by different teachers, including librarians, history and geography teachers, education advisors, and art teachers. Throughout the year, they will create, after researching a list of significant women who fought for feminism, a portrait of these women, and also prepare an oral presentation where they will share the lives of these women. On March 8th, they will present their artwork to the entire educational community, which will then vote in each class for the presentation and artwork they find most relevant, and the name of the class next year, meaning if I'm in 6th grade B and I presented Marie Curie, next year my 5th grade B will be called 5th grade Marie Curie, and so on for all the other classes. This project is developed at every level of middle school and aims not only to enhance these students' sense of belonging to the community, but also to teach them civic values as early as possible and to work on these discriminatory stereotypes against women. We also thought about expanding this project, especially within the European framework, through the e-twinning platform. So this platform was created in 2005. It was an initiative from the European Commission to bring together different institutions from European countries or for a school exchange where the students from our middle school would go promote and explain how they carried out this project, how it was set up, and adapt it to the scale of other European countries. Of course, promoting and spreading this project and awareness is absolutely necessary to transform mindsets throughout the entire country and beyond. But we shouldn't just settle for small-scale efforts. I think we also need to think on a global scale, at least European for now, to educate our future citizens. There you go.
Thank you very much, Camille and Marie. Anyway, I can only encourage you to apply and present your project on the European project platform, Europe Plural Feminine, in the call for creators, where we are calling for all kinds of initiatives, original initiatives that you have presented to us here. I hope that when you become a lead education advisor, you'll be able to implement it in your various institutions. Thank you for listening. We're going to continue with Leah Salvin, who is the director of the Information Center on Women's and Family Rights in Southern Corsica. So Leah, hello. Could you first introduce this institution that doesn't necessarily exist in other partner countries of the project and is a member of the European Union?
Hello, Sébastien. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your question. So, the Information Center on Women's and Family Rights is an association created by the state in France, and it exists, at least on French territory, in all French departments. It's overseen by a national federation that sets the main guidelines and directions for the actions of the CIDFF. But as you might have understood, the Information Centers on Women's and Family Rights, CIDFF, have the mission of implementing the government's policy on equality in the territories, with a particular focus on combating violence against women. Also, the CIDFFs have the ability to raise awareness, understanding and comprehension, and educate about all these issues related to equality and respect through interventions with partners like the national education system, professionals, and institutions, since we have several agreements and approvals. In any case, it's an association that is very active and very dynamic. Ajaccio, all the way to Porto Vecchio, Bonifacio, also covering rural areas. Through small towns and regions with ongoing support and action specifically tailored to these different micro-regions.
Thank you, Leah. I would like to know, you presented the different missions, your very decentralized presence, closer to the populations, including in rural areas. For what reasons? Who comes to you? For what reasons? It feels like this might be the last chance. Maybe it's before legal action. Maybe it happens during or afterwards. I don't know. Who comes to see you?
So people come to see us regardless of the situation, even if women have already filed a complaint, or even before filing a complaint, or even when the idea of filing a complaint hasn't really taken shape yet. They come to us for questions that can be very basic, like what the consequences of separation might be, or what the financial implications of divorce would be regarding child custody. And for that, we actually have a lawyer who works with us and can advise women. And if they don't have a lawyer, she can refer them to the Bar Association. We have women who come to us with questions related to labor rights as well. So for harassment in the workplace, for assaults at work. So I repeat, indeed, since we have a very, I would say, targeted field, it's mainly about sexist or sexual assaults. We also have families who come to see us because we support families in the context of a mediated meeting space, which is accessible through a court order from the family court judge. So we have different profiles coming to us both before and after legal proceedings. And we have a holistic approach that allows us to best support these individuals with a lawyer who is the CIDFF's lawyer and who also holds regular sessions throughout southern Corsica. EPAC in Ajaccio offers support with psychologists who work with us. Psychologists from the Daytime Reception Center of Falepe Casadon for women victims of violence, and also another psychologist who works with us in other situations. And eventually we will also have an employment unit to advise women in the areas of employment, vocational training and entrepreneurship.
Do you have any figures regarding your activity? In any case, are you being asked for help more and more? Are more women coming to knock on your door? Is it the case that this is happening because they are on the path to empowerment, or is it rather because these issues, let's say, of equality and violence are becoming more pronounced and are gaining new relevance?
So personally, regarding the actions of the CIDFF in southern Corsica, I don't have much perspective because I started my position in October. But on the other hand, I can give you some information about more general data regarding southern Corsica. Indeed, in certain micro-regions where there was a high rate of violence, we noticed that particularly in Porto Vecchio, thanks to the establishment of the Family Protection Unit of the Gendarmerie, people have started to speak out more, and more women are reaching out to this Gendarmerie unit. Also, people have been able to speak out more thanks, I would say, to collaboration among different stakeholders and awareness-raising actions. Although there's still room for improvement in visibility, also in Ajaccio itself, we have a social worker at the police station who is the social worker from UNAF, who helps connect the different associations with the users, the complainants, and especially women who are victims of violence. So we are truly moving towards a real, I would say, a broad improvement in listening through greater collaboration among the different stakeholders, which is a goal of the region, a goal of the state as well, and also of the Public Prosecutor's Office and the President of the Judicial Court in Ajaccio.
I also wanted to get your thoughts before we continue with testimonies from people who have been through or who frequent the CIDFF on the previous interventions, specifically regarding the issue of stereotypes. How can stereotypes provoke or create a number of prejudices, even leading to violence or harassment situations? And how can this educational preventive action help avoid having people come knocking on your door tomorrow or the day after?
In any case, the points about stereotypes are really very, very striking, and especially the fact that we've found a grounding in myths, these myths that we've integrated, I think, even into our culture, into our collective unconscious even. And for me, it is an angle of attack which is really very enlightening in order to be able to implement interventions. By the way, I would be really happy to welcome Jenna El Hilali, Marie Péré, and Camille Courrieu to the CIDFF if they want to come see us. I think we could organize some great projects together. But in any case, this grounding in culture, in the collective unconscious, in, I would say, education, it's very interesting to consider through the lens of myth and its interpretation. Also regarding the commitment of Marie and Camille, congratulations to them as well. And above all, what really pays off are grassroots actions. So it's about getting as close as possible to the students, as close as possible to the communities, and being able to work with organizations and with institutions, well, colleges, schools that are aware of the issue. So, institutions, well, colleges, schools that are aware of the issue. So truly, I mean, they will bear fruit, and I can't wait to see them put into action. There you go.
Thank you, Leah. Could you perhaps maybe share a few personal testimonies or experiences from people who have been to the CIDFF?
It's really important for the CIDFF to be there because there are too many women who don't know their rights. Too many women who don't know their children's rights. Too many women who are all alone and don't know what they're entitled to. Even if we go online, we don't understand anything at all. And thankfully, they're here to tell us, and especially to explain it to us. Because it's nice to tell us, but if we don't understand it, it doesn't really help much.
I'm proud of the journey I've had since I arrived at CIDEF because honestly, I didn't expect to do everything I've done. And it really gave me back my confidence, especially
on a human level. They are really great people, people who listen, who understand, who support. And those are values that are fading away, and you really feel valued here.
For everyday life and maybe for a job, just feeling good is already very, very beneficial. For me, the CDFF is really about empowerment of we really are.
I was able to take a training course in this area, so in entrepreneurship, thanks to the CIDF. That must motivate you in the morning.
Yes, that should motivate us. It motivates us. Let's say we are lucky to have a federation and also counterparts in other departments who really push us a lot. There you go.
Very well indeed. I am doing very well. Thank you very much. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Marie, Camille, Jenna, for this overview that we will continue during the next 3 local meetings taking place in January, February, and March in the different partner countries, the Europe Purole Feminine project. Before we wrap up, I want to reiterate my call for projects. Also, if you have any ideas, you can even share them with the people you can welcome at the CIDFF, or I'm also passing this on to the students who are joining us this morning. Anyway, if you have any projects, don't hesitate to send them to the platform on the Europe Plus Role Feminine website.